Hello, everybody. I'm with Maria Laws. And this is, I was just saying, is the first name that I can just pronounce without any problems because it just rolls off the tongue. And it's a delight to have you with us to teach us about being unapologetic, girl.
Oh, thank you, Jessica. I'm here to serve. I'm glad the name worked, and I'm really excited to be in conversation about this topic. Really important one for all of us to be thinking about.
And the word unapologetic, ChatGPT actually helped me with it because ChatGPT's like my boyfriend, my coach, he's my everything. I don't know if you can relate.
I'm in tech. I'm with you on that. I haven't named mine yet, but I feel like we're at that point in our relationship that I should.
He needs the keys to the apartment, I think. Yeah. Yeah. So I was like, this is who I am. This is what I do. This is what I've done for all these companies. Like, what am I, ChatGPT? Who am I? And they're like, sounds like unapologetic is what you're teaching people and what you've been doing for a long time. I was like, oh, hallelujah. And that's how I came across
I
that.
love that. I think that's a really powerful distillation about almost like your one word branding about what your purpose is, what you're really trying to do in all these things that you're doing.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. But to find that for oneself is very hard because we women were taught to be humble. So we're not taught to say that we're experts in something. And anytime I've actually been like really confident about something, someone comes to me and is like, well, it's only happened twice, which means I've had a lot of self-doubt in this lifetime, but like, you're arrogant. I don't like your behavior. You think you know everything. And I'm like, all I'm doing is saying that I'm very good at this, just like any male would say. And we would go, oh, he's good. He should become president. When I say it, I get like women being like, she's arrogant. She thinks she knows what she's doing. I do know what I'm doing. Why do I have to apologize for doing what I studied for 12 years of my life? Like, it's just tough.
You know, you got me thinking about a little bit about how important it is to have a community around you. I know I was an educator for a lot of years, loved working with students, K-12, mostly high school, but also university level. And there was this moment where I think many folks go through this in many orgs, but I think particularly in teaching, you're like, okay, well, things aren't really going well in the adult space of like maybe administration or whatever, but it's all about the kids. And that's great. That's fine. But there is a point where you're like, okay, I'm going to try to change things from inside. I'm going to try to change the culture, make it easier for other women in STEM in my case, or whatever it might be. But there's a moment where you really go, wait a minute, should I really keep banging my head against this wall? Or is it time to create my own space or find a space that allows me to be exactly what you're saying, where I never have to feel like if I don't couch this differently, it's going to offend someone. And I think that's one of the things that I've really found for myself. I'm not saying abandon spaces, but I think you do need to attend to that. Am I really having the impact I want if that's what I always have to do first? And so finding that space for yourself, either something you do on your own or a new workspace can be, I think, be really powerful so that you don't have to constantly navigate those norms, which shouldn't be. Yeah, I don't know. That's what I've been finding for myself. But yeah, something that's been in my mind.
Yeah. When we were talking about what we were going to talk about in our conversations before, you had such great questions that I didn't even think of really. And I titled this talk, Don't Even Think of Being Unapologetic Before You Do This. And for me, that was the answer. Well, why don't you answer what you would say to that? And then I can ask a question about what I think the answer would be for me.
Well, goodness, I love this question. I feel like not only could this, live stream be like 9 hours long, we should write a dissertation paper on it. But I came up with a couple things in my mind when we were talking about what it means to be unapologetic. And a lot of it has to do with kind of naming things. And I know part of it, as you just mentioned, around understanding what you're actually good at, like to name it allows you to connect more clearly to what you're going to contribute, what you're going to do. And you can do that when you can name your competence, then you can proceed with confidence is kind of how I think about it. But I think I think having confidence in your competence is like the number one foundational thing. In order to have confidence, then you have to know what that is. And I think the other thing for me is a lot of it has to do with what you're exactly talking about in your conversation with ChatGPT about what you do meaning what you are, right? So you listed all these things that you've done, but there's a unifying theme underneath that wasn't a specific technical skill or a specific achievement. It was like this purpose or mission. And I think for me, that connecting to what my purpose is changes the conversation I'm having in my mind. So this idea of leaving the classroom and the guilt that comes with that, like what would it take to leave children, right? Like, because I wasn't burnt out, but at all. I really enjoy working with students even after 20 some years, but I was able to align with a bigger purpose about wanting to scale these things that I was doing with a small number of students. What are the ways that technology could help us do that for more students, not just in my own country, but around the world, where there's maybe a lack of teachers or whatever else there might be. We could do more, and teachers need to be in that space to do it. So when I aligned with purpose, that allowed me to take steps. Like I've been dipping my foot in the pool, if you would say, about trying outside projects with teaching. But the idea of actually leaving, it took so long to get there. And I could have gotten there sooner had I connected to purpose. My purpose isn't just about this room, this subject, this role, something more. So I think a lot of unapologetic comes from being aligned with your purpose. And when that's present, that you walk differently. You walk differently through life when you're there.
Well, I put 2 quotes from the author, the poet, the author, the feminist, the powerful Black lesbian woman that you sent. Yes, I hadn't heard of her, and now she's my new hero. So, do you know it on the top of your head, the one quote about purpose?
Yeah, it was something I'm never great at exactly saying it, but I'm pretty close. When I dare to be powerful, when I want to use my strengths towards something, or toward my vision, it becomes less and less important that I'm afraid. Meaning all those that noise quiets when you're like, yes, all these things might be true, and yet I still need to go forward because this is the pathway. I think it doesn't make the other things resolve, but it makes them less important. And I think that that's important. I'm so glad you love that quote. It's a really powerful one for me about connecting to purpose makes a lot of other things that we made primary, puts them back where they belong, which is back there.
So there's so many women that I know. I don't hang out with men. Like I have all these birthday parties and not birthday parties. I only have one a year, but I have all these events and it's full of women. And I'm like, I don't have any men to hang out with because I'm kind of tired of males who aren't emotionally available, vulnerable, that don't tell stories like women. Like I just think women like are just so in tune, alive, and so I always have to try and find men to come to my parties, and I like beg strangers just to come as an aside. So I had this obsession my whole life about like the male gaze. I didn't even know what that was until like some Gen Z like called it that, or some feminist literature brought it out to me. But this idea of like, how much time have I spent as a Canadian kid looking at myself in the mirror, trying to get the attention of males, trying to find a husband, making sure I don't turn into the cat lady, which is a total like failure, right? Like a woman without children that never got married. Like that was the worst thing that could ever happen to a woman in my generation. And now I am pretty much a cat lady, right? And it's awesome, right? I don't even have a cat, but I have none of the other stuff. And it's like this, when you don't worry about the extras, like looking good, having this, buying that, feel it like this, and you're focused on like what you actually wanted, it all just becomes quieter, you know what I mean? And now like I've become my worst nightmare essentially. And it's awesome because I actually followed what I loved, not what I was feared and pushed to become, you know?
I think that's really powerful you're talking about. And a couple things came to mind right away as you were talking. One is I had this kind of realization a couple months ago. I was kind of thinking about who are my champions right now. I was thinking about asking for a raise and a promotion. I was also thinking about, okay, I'm at a point where there might be more things I want to add in, like a board seat. There are other things I want to do, but I'm not really sure who are my champions right now. And it was a really cool moment to see that as I've gotten closer to my purpose, it does invite folks in that I wouldn't necessarily have sought out or thought of. And so like just speaking of gender, like 3 of my top 5 champions this year have all been male colleagues that literally are the folks that are talking about me in rooms where I'm not at. They're encouraging me in real time. Like they're doing things that I don't know that I was ready to give credit for. And I don't think I was necessarily wrong. Again, we've got a whole history of this happening across every generation. However, that aligning with purpose brought in the right kind of through. And particularly, I would also say in tech, it isn't, it's not very balanced gender wise. So I would have more of this happen. But I wasn't necessarily expecting it. And so I think that's the other thing that I thought about, I was really reflecting on around this idea of what it means to be unapologetic, is that so often I feel like when we have those voices that are in the way, Jessica, it's because we're worried about some negative consequences if we present the way we want to. But we forget that there are positive consequences too. People show up that you would not have looked for, that you would not have asked. And now here they are. Now you've got more allies than you knew. And on the flip side, if someone shows up in a way that's horrible, well, now you know that you don't need to worry about trying to be unapologetic or like trying to couch anything for them because it's not going to help. So I think it does actually help you get really clear on who to spend your time and effort on, you and the people that are your allies, and who you really have wasted. Nothing you do is going to change. Like you tempering your clothes, your voice, your ideas is not going to serve. It's not going to suddenly get them on your team. So that was a big moment for me. Definitely a lot of people pleasing in my background. And also too, I was a teacher. You're in service of others. You want them to be comfortable. You want them to have this experience. But I realized I really needed to treat myself with that same respect. And there are unintended positive consequences around allies and supporters, colleagues, collaborators, partners in crime, but not crime, that I wouldn't have found. I would have never known. And that's been a really positive thing for me. Yeah, it's been great.
So you found your champions in that, but could you share a little bit about like, there's the typical question in interviews, like, if you could have dinner with like a woman in history, there's been the only women that made history books are unapologetic women. All the other ones were making bread and having 12 babies. So who kind of inspired you? Is it in the STEM world or is it beyond that?
Yeah. I have to say, Jessica, going to what you just said there, I had this experience, and then I'll answer your question. So I am part of this really cool program at Stanford University. I live in the Bay Area in California, in the United States, and they have this really cool Women's Leadership Innovation Lab. They actually do research on what it means to be a woman leader and what are the key qualities that we could help young people really engage with now. I think there's 9. They're not a secret, I can tell you. But how do we develop programming for young women so that, if we're waiting for the system to change, what they say pay equity is going to take like 19 generations. Okay, I do not have time for you. So you go tell me all the ways it can't happen, and I'm going to work to try to make it happen where I'm at with my crew, right? So this program, it's called the Seeds of Change program. And I remember my students and I still work with my students on this, just on my free time. We meet once a month and we talk about one particular thing, and then they like work on it the whole week and then the whole month, and then we come back and blah, blah, blah. We do this whole thing. It's really fun. And at one point we're like, oh, let's go bigger. Let's have an Instagram page. Let's talk about women in history. Let's interview our moms. Let's interview our elders. Let's try to make this a bigger thing. And when we started making a list of women leaders in history that we admire, what was so shocking more than anything else is that they were literally just doing whatever they wanted to do. That was the thing that made them so outstanding, is that they literally, like Marie Curie, just decided she cared about science. She wanted to figure stuff out. And then she wound up, winning 2 different Nobel Prizes, one of only 5 people to do that in all of history. And yet she wasn't allowed to give the speech because they didn't allow women in the room to give speeches. So, but she wasn't thinking about an award or I'm going to like do a thing. She didn't have in mind what the end result was. She was just serious and engaged in the thing. And we see that over and over again with change makers, with folks that inspire us. Like, think about how amazing that is, that the thing that inspires us most is people just being themselves, that artist, that poet, that speaker, that change maker, the person who is working in community. So I feel like if I were to give you my list, we would be here again another 9 days. But more importantly, to your point, it doesn't have to be in a lane, because what they all have in common is they followed something of interest to them, and it became something bigger. I have a silly story, but it means something to me. I do have a science background and I am in tech now, but I also have a dance background. I was a dancer while I was a teacher. I love it when my students would find me on YouTube. I got to be cool for a minute before I gave them chemistry homework. So I got 5 minutes of cool, and then we went back to the thing. But I wound up getting like an art degree. I can't draw, but I can teach people like the practice of art making. And so I decided, even though I was a science teacher, I was going to start an art club. But I didn't call it an art club on campus because, one, I didn't want to make the art teachers mad, because I certainly cannot draw, so that seemed rude. But also, I didn't want just the artists to come. I wanted kids like me who just thought art seemed kind of cool. And so I called it the Storytelling Project, so I lied to them. But we wound up doing this. The first year I kind of directed it. I had this project. We met every Sunday for 2 hours. High school students came to school and did homework for no reason other than we were interested in doing this thing together. And we wound up interviewing elders about their musical memories and then making art about their stories. And we did a whole bunch of stuff more. The next year we did a map making project where they did maps of their future, and they all were so weird and different and cool. And what was so interesting about this whole process is that it wasn't the outcome that was the most amazing thing. Is I had them keep like like an art journal. I call it an accordion book practice. That's something we do here. Some of the art folks here in Oakland, where it's sort of like you can write, you can draw, you can sketch, you can, it's just sort of like a hodgepodge of like, I guess, scrapbooking, if you will. But we put them out next to their projects. And when the parents came to look at them, it was very clear that the scrapbook, if you will, was as artful as the end product. And something about that idea that the journey is what's as inspiring as the outcome. Because the outcome, you go, oh, I could never do that. But when you see the story, you see that you could, and you love what they did. And I feel like when I think about your work, when we do stories, we allow people to see themselves and their own story. Like that storytelling project meant so much to me. I would have absolutely wanted it to be a full-time class. Like that's how joyful it was, even though we were all doing this on our free time for like, you know what I'm saying? It meant a lot, and it inspired others as well. So the storytelling is important. I think it's critical for us to name what matters to us and to pursue our curiosities.
Okay, so pursuing curiosity leads you to your purpose, right? And your passion. So if you, that must be it. So a friend, Belinda, just wrote, I assume this is her person that she wants.
Another American, just a writer. She wrote many award-winning books, fiction books. Okay. Also, she was, I think she was for one presidential inauguration, she was the inaugural poet. She wrote a poem for it. She speaks a lot on feminism, sexism, but primarily racism as well, and how they're distractors from our purpose. She's incredible.
Yeah. So this Belinda, she does a comedy show, and she calls it she has the C word in the title. And us North Americans, we don't like that word. We don't use that word. And she is an American. And there's these things like slut walks, right? And it's taking the words back from the patriarchy who called them to us to harm us, right? Like naming us body parts of women is apparently an insult throughout history, right? And it's this beautiful idea that you have to fight. And you can fight with your words, with your art, with your purpose, but you cannot follow the path that is well trodden of all the women behind, in front of us that were oppressed and dependent on males. It's like we can't do exactly what our parents, our moms and our grandmas taught us. It's like you have to hear all that stuff and be like, that's when we didn't have education. That's when we weren't able to do that. But who are our examples for doing it the other way? Like 99% of my friends' mothers had children. A little riddle for you there, right? There were very few women who didn't have children and who took their career seriously in the 1980s in small town Canada, right? So I had zero examples of that. My adopted grandmother, she never had children. And so for an 80-year-old woman to have never had children, that was even off the charts, right? And so she, I think, is the reason I became unapologetic. Just this sweet German woman who never had kids that says, you don't need a husband, do what you love. And she just volunteered her whole life helping Russian immigrants. Her husband was from the Czech Republic, or no, from Yugoslavia. And she volunteered. And when she was already 85, she'd be like, oh, I'm driving old people with the Red Cross to the hospital today. Oh, old people. They're always complaining.
I love this. I love that you shared the story, because you do have me thinking of my own mother. She stayed at home with us when we were young, but she had a career as an FDA, a Food and Drug Administration, a federal government, a position as a chemist, which I looked up how many women her age have a chemistry degree in the United States. And it's under 1.5%. So, but, she was also, this other person. And then when I was in high school, she decided to become a teacher. Very fun reason why, but that's for a different day. So she went back to the workforce then. But I feel like, I could see her preparing us for both, where she wanted us to be ready for, this sort of traditional lifestyle. But there, this other part, my mom was also a dancer. She had many things that I have done just a little bit more. And I know it's because of the way that she did things. I remember this moment, my sister and I were cooking dinner. My brother was hanging out. We can discuss that later about how unfair that was, but he was hanging out while we were feverishly working. And so we're doing this very traditional thing, right? Gendered thing. And then my mom walks by, and as I'm making the pasta or whatever, she's like, and don't let anyone tell you you're not good at math just because you're a girl. It was completely random, but my mom did that all the time, Jessica. Like, she would just come by and say some very large thing about societal norms, but it was so random. My sister would be like, okay, but I swear to you, they stuck in there, like this idea of, and also too, just this sense of, I really do appreciate that within whatever the construct was for her, she did the biggest that she could at that time, and also wanted to be trying all these things. But she did make it possible for us to think a little bit bigger. I also know that our next generation is going to be starting from a different place, but I don't think it's ever too late. This has been such a good experience for me to move from the classroom into this bigger world where I'm in innovation. Nothing has been done before. So if I'm trying to fit into some expectations, well, then I already missed the memo, because there aren't any. I get to set them. And now I've got these mentors and champions who are reminding me of that you are the one. We believe in you, trust you. We're so happy you're here. And also you are the one, like, go forth. And I'm not saying that I'm giving that all to them, but it does help to combat the inner messaging we've been getting from everywhere, except for these bright spots that you and I are talking about. And so it does really help to think of this in a community way, that podcast, your work, even just simple connections with colleagues and with relatives, with friends, allows the vision of what's possible to get bigger. And that's what we want. No matter what folks choose, we want them to enjoy it. That's the other thing I was going to say. I had this experience when I was a teacher. It was a really awful one. I remember it very vividly. But I remember the reason why I was so angry about it was that someone had left an anonymous note in my box. I had just gotten a teaching award, and I hadn't said anything about it because I was being very apologetic, but it was in a magazine. I'm sure people saw it. And I got this note in my box. It was like a printed out article from a very right-wing kind of conspiracy group called Breitbart. And they had highlighted all these sections talking about how women didn't really deserve their positions. And it was a really awful thing. And I remember I had like an immediate visceral reaction. One, I was a little bit vaguely afraid. It was in a staff area. So it was one of my colleagues had done this. Yeah, and they'd highlighted. It wasn't like they sent me a meme. It was like highlighted. It was double-sided. But I went to an administrator. I think I wasn't sure what I was going to ask for. I was just sort of like bewildered by this because I'm well-liked and I'm a nice lady. I don't know what this is. And the person was like, oh, free speech, nothing you can do. And I remember I had this complete moment related to what I was going to say right now, is that it isn't just thinking about what's possible for myself, but this idea, I got a little mad. This person wanted to rob me of some joy of my moment, that I had done something big that was new and unusual. And they felt so compelled to make sure I couldn't really fully enjoy it.
Mm.
And something about that visceral response, I think, was very important to continuing this idea of being unapologetic, because
Mm.
go, absolutely not. You don't get to win. And also,
Mm.
what if I had been a younger or newer teacher?
Mhm.
This would have really done something to me. This would have damaged me. This just made me mad. So the
Yeah.
sense of trusting my own responses and not
Mhm.
feeling like I need to like wait to think of the best way to talk about this with the administrator. Oh, this might get someone in trouble. No, I immediately went to the district office, so superintendent level of the entire district. And I
Mhm.
said what had happened. I'm like, I just got this and I am not okay with it. And the person immediately understood that this was going to be a potential legal risk, like they needed to do it. They did an entire forensic tech exploration. They were able to locate the workstation and the two people that use the workstation.
No.
Ironically, Jessica, both of those people were the first two names or faces that popped in my head when I saw this. Not that anything that ever happened, but my point is,
Mhm.
you know. And so all it meant to me was the fact that that happened and it was public. I never really, like, I had nothing to do with that forensic part of it. And I don't actually know what they did to the two people, but let me tell you what, they won't be doing it again. So this
Mhm.
idea of really being unapologetic with
Yeah.
yourself. You don't need to talk yourself out of your feelings. And I know that I got to enjoy the thing I got to enjoy. I did not allow this person to make me feel smaller.
Mhm.
And I made
Mhm.
it, in my mind, I was able to take that and now do something to ensure that this wouldn't happen to someone else, hopefully. Like that, there was a message sent. I'm giving you all the teacher eyebrows because I felt so good. I felt so empowered by that moment that no, just because you said it and you shouldn't have doesn't mean I have to take it. I
Yeah.
don't have to
Yeah.
receive this. And you're not going to keep me off my path. I'm doing something, it's being recognized for a reason, and I want to keep doing it. And you're not going to make this happen. I feel really proud of that moment more than anything, that I didn't just accept what authority said, was like, no, it's no big deal. And I was like, this is absolutely a big deal. Like I
Mhm.
was, yeah. So it made me feel really good.
Oh, that's such a great process of like what happens in the head of unapologetic women. Like sometimes people say like, "Oh wow, that woman," like, or sometimes they say it to me like, "Wow, how do you do that?" And I'm like, "Well, I don't know. I just hear a voice in my head that says unacceptable, and then I don't shut up." But hearing you say it is like, you cannot rob me of my joy that I deserved, and you don't have that permission to. And that power to stand up for yourself is, I guess, what it's about. When you know what you're doing, well, who the hell are you to take my joy away? There's 8 billion yous in this world. I can't let them all take it away from me, so I gotta do what I love.
I
That
I I really was thinking about this story this morning because it wasn't just about, it was about that joy space. That I think that's part of what unapologetic means. When you, like you said, you can say just objectively, I am good at this. You get to
mm,
enjoy that. Why wouldn't you? These are, gifts. These are talents that you have developed. They're for a purpose that matters to you. Why shouldn't you? It's all such hard work. We should
mm,
be able to enjoy it. And I just, that was a big moment of I can look back now and see that as a milestone moment. At the
beautiful.
time, it was literally like I had no other choice. And that's what I think the Audre Lorde quote is about. That if I am trying to be powerful for a purpose, that is the only mission. And so I think for me, the best way for me to know that I give myself permission to lean all the way in is that body sense, again, that dancer in me. Like when I feel that little bit of flush on my neck, I'm having a response. There is a bigger thing happening here, and I have
Mhm.
every right to call it out, and we need to move forward. And that's come up for me both in like these big dramatic moments with someone who's never going to be my ally, but it's also been in more micro moments with folks that I think are thinking they're my ally, but are doing something right now that is not great. I do feel empowered to know that I can trust that our relationship can hold me being angry. Well, my version
Mhm.
of angry is still like, I'm not screaming at anyone, but I can call this out and we
Yeah.
can move forward. And again, I really like this idea of how reparative the work is. Like, I feel even right now, thinking about this moment that I just shared with you, it makes up for many other moments where I didn't do that, where I
Mm.
didn't stand up. Like, I can look back at that memory and it makes me feel it heals some things from
Mm.
before then when I didn't stand up for myself, when I allowed someone their opinion to take precedent over my own about myself. So those stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves are very important. And I need to protect that space. And that sounds like something you're really good at doing, and also about sharing with others, like protecting our own sense of self in a world that doesn't always want to see us as more than what it serves them, I think is really important.
This is, we went over because I wanted to hear the story. I wanted to share my story. I wanted to hear like the brains of women who are unapologetic. And this is exactly what the show is about. So you were the first one that actually, we made the topic unapologetic, whereas other people, I'm just like, what are the habits that make you so cool? But like just labeling it, being like, what was the story? What is the pivotal point? So thank you for sharing the pivotal point when you stood up for yourself and you knew this isn't okay, and you put down the boundaries and you became a difficult woman. You could have just let it slide past and been the nice teacher who's bigger than that. And it's not about that. It's about like, no, who are you to take my joy? Like, imagine if we walked around saying that, like, who are you to take my joy? The answer would be like a stranger, a male on the bus, a cranky old woman. No, you don't get my joy just because you're a cranky old woman, right?
Like, writing that question down. I think that could be a really good mantra whenever you're feeling like. And if I can just say one thing I love that you named a difficult woman, which is not something I would have felt comfortable with at the time, because I was still trying to not be a difficult woman. I was just so compelled. But when other people came up to me, I remember one woman came up to me, was like, "Hey, I just got interviewed by the district about a computer." Like she was looking like it was my fault. And I was just, in fact, I really don't think they should have put my name in it, but maybe the two men did. I don't know, whatever. But I honestly, it was so easy at that point to let that go. You know, again, difficult woman to you, but to me, I did a service to myself and to others, and I'm good with it. So, well, Jessica, I'm also thinking at some point we might need to do a part 2, because I think we both have a lot more to say about what it means to be
be fun. Yeah, I'm up for it. I'm gonna interview Belinda in the upcoming time. I'm calling you Belinda because you're still online, and we're gonna talk about the C word. I'm not gonna say it because I'm Canadian. I'm not allowed to, but I will let you say it, and I'm gonna get stronger that way by taking back the words that oppressed us forever. So you're amongst friends. Thank you so much, Marie.
Thank you for having me, and thanks to everyone on the call. I can't wait for us to connect on LinkedIn and beyond and talk more. It matters.
Okay. It matters. I matter. My joy matters. Okay. Bye, girl. Thanks.
Bye.
Ciao.